Hello and welcome to this final first look exploring session looking at Edward the Third by authors unknown. We are looking at the last portion of the text. We're going from what is labelled as Act 4, Scene 3, certainly in the edition I'm looking at, where we are getting to the latter stages of Edward doing things in France. What Edward does on his holidays. It's quite extensive. He's visited Crécy. He's visiting Calais. He's having a lovely little tour of some lovely local spots and meeting some lovely people, local citizens along the way. There's a notable 6 coming up. It's all fun old times for Edward there. And to find out how the play ends, we have this wonderful team of readers who will be reading through the final scenes of the text. So today, reading King Edward himself is
Longstaffe, scholar of early modern drama based in the northwest of England.
And reading his son Prince Edward today is...
Hello, I'm Valentina. I'm an actor and voiceover artist in London.
Reading the head of the opposition, King John of France today is...
Aliki, Chapple, actor, translator, theatre maker in Lancaster in England.
And reading the character of Audley today is...
Rachael, Nicole, actor in New Jersey.
Reading all the Heralds as well as Artois is...
It's Briony in the Midlands.
Reading Villiers and Citizen Number 2 is...
Helen Good, historian in Yorkshire.
Reading Charles and Copland is...
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm a college composition teacher. I live in the northwestern United States.
Reading Queen Philippa today is...
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm not a queen, but I shall try.
Reading Philip, just Philip, no Philippa, no Queen, is...
Hi, Alan Scott, based in Suffolk.
Reading Salisbury today is...
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Amisu, and I'm an author based in Romford.
And reading Captain, Citizen 1 and an Esquire is...
Hello, Dan, based in Montpellier, France.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'll be reading stage directions, inferred or otherwise, as we get to grips with the Act 4, Scene 3, as I have it labelled here. We're intersecting with some of the lesser characters who we have vaguely met before. Have we met Charles before? I think we've met Charles before. Yes. I can't really remember. I know we've met Villiers before because he was in the last few scenes we did earlier. So let's find out what's going on here. Enter Charles of Normandy and Villiers.
I wonder, Villiers, that thou shouldst importune me for one that is our deadly enemy.
Not for his sake, my gracious lord, so much am I become an earnest advocate, as that thereby my ransom will be quit.
Thy ransom, man? What needst thou talk of that? Art thou not free? And are not all occasions that happen for advantage of our foes to be accepted and stood upon?
No, my good lord, except the same be just. For profit must with honour be commixed, or else our actions are but scandalous. But, letting pass their intricate objections, wilt please your highness to subscribe or no?
Villiers, I will not, nor I cannot do it. Salisbury shall not have his will so much to claim a passport, how it pleaseth himself.
Why then, I know the extremity, my lord. I must return to prison whence I came.
Return? I hope thou wilt not. What bird that hath escaped from the fowler's gin will not beware how she's ensnared again? Or what is he, so senseless and secure, that having hardly passed a dangerous gulf, that having passed a dangerous gulf, will put himself in peril there again?
Ah, but it is mine oath, my gracious lord, which I in conscience may not violate, or else a kingdom should not draw me hence.
Thine oath? Why, I don't know what word that's supposed to be. Why doth bind thee? What doth bind thee to abide? Hast thou not sworn obedience to thy prince?
In all things that uprightly he commands. But either to persuade or threaten me not to perform the covenant of my word is lawless, and I need not to obey.
Why, is it lawful for a man to kill and not to break a promise to his foe?
Oh, to kill, my lord, when war is once proclaimed, so that our quarrel be for wrongs received, no doubt is lawfully permitted us. But in an oath, we must be well advised how we do swear, and when we once have sworn not to infringe it, though we die therefore. Therefore, my lord, as willing I return, as if I were to fly to paradise.
Stay, my Villiers, thy honorable mind deserves to be eternally admired. Thy suit shall be no longer thus deferred. Give me the paper, I'll subscribe to it. And wherefore I love thee as Villiers, hereafter I'll embrace thee as myself. Stay, and be in favor with thy lord.
I humbly thank your grace. I must dispatch and send this passport first unto the Earl, and then I will attend your highness' pleasure.
Do so, Villiers. And Charles, when he hath need, be such as soldiers, however he speed.
And exit Villiers, enter King John.
Come, Charles, and arm thee. Edward is entrapped, the Prince of Wales is falling into our hands, and we have compassed him. He cannot escape.
But will your highness fight today?
What else, my son? He's scarce 8,000 strong, and we are 70,000 at the least.
I have a prophecy, my gracious lord, wherein is written that success is like to happen us in this outrageous war. It was delivered me at Cressus Field by one that is an aged hermit there. When feathered fowl shall make thine army tremble, and flint stones rise and break the battle ray, then think on him that doth not now dissemble, for that shall be the hapless dreadful day. Yet in the end, thy foot thou shalt advance as far as England as the foe in France.
By this it seems we shall be fortunate, for as it is impossible that stones should ever rise and break the battle ray, or airy fowl make men in arms to quake, so is it like we shall not be subdued. Or say this might be true, yet in the end, since he doth promise we shall drive him hence and forage their country as they have done ours, by this revenge, that loss will seem the less. But all our frivolous fancies, toys, and dreams, once we are sure we have ensnared the son, catch we the father after how we can.
And exit King John and Charles. So, yes, sudden King John entry. The younger Edward is entrapped. Terrible things might be happening. Incidents coming off following a scene with Charles and Villiers discussing what, because it's following on from what we were doing yesterday, and I've slightly lost the plot. Who was paying better attention than me? As to what they were precisely discussing. Helen.
Well, I can't remember what was happening yesterday, but today it seems that an exchange has been effected, Villiers for Salisbury. And so Villiers is now free and has to get Salisbury's release and passport back to the English lines. His seigneur has says, yeah, we got you back, we're one up on the deal, why should we go through with it? And Villiers is pointing him out to him that life is one thing, but honor is more important.
Because that's following on from Act 4, Scene 1, where the sort of setting up of this was actually prefixed. So yes, it is a continuation of last time, but it is explicated nicely in the scene itself. Valentina, were you waving?
Yeah, I was just like, because I think yesterday Salisbury basically sent Villiers to get the passport, and set him free. So this is the continuation of that, going like, oh, this might be the last time I trust a Frenchman. And that I think is a continuation of that.
Other thoughts? Obviously, the war's still going on. Just because it seemed like the French were beat in the last few sessions, actually no, the war is still very much alive, and the prince is in danger. Any additional thoughts from the room? Still quite early in the session. You don't have to be leaping in too energetically. It's fine. I'm still screwing on my hat of just what is actually going on. Helen?
I think that this honour and oath-taking actually looks as if it may become a theme, because it goes back to the first act, where you've got other sorts of oaths and fealties, which there was a temptation to break, and honourable people were saying no, namely marriage vows.
And then we have a prophecy. Always like a prophecy, because as we all know, prophecies are always straightforward and come out exactly as you're expecting them to do so. I don't think anyone could decode this in any other way than King John himself expects it to go.
Yes.
I set these things up for someone to knock it down. But nobody wants to play that cue. Okay.
We're going to let you hang in the breeze on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why?
Yes, Helen.
Why is it though that there are prophecies which appear to be ridiculous, though this one's fairly easy, but there are never false prophecies. Nobody ever in any early modern play that I have ever come across makes a prophecy that turns out to be wrong. Ever.
Well, in any modern film or television, where something a bit premonition ever happens, it never turns out to be. It might be a bit ambiguous as to whether it's come true because of the premonition, but it always does basically come true. Nobody ever just goes, "Oh no, that was just coincidence. It had nothing. It's just confirmation bias," or anything like that. Never seems to happen.
The force of narrativium.
Yeah, because that's their narrative function. To foretell, not to be proved wrong.
Yeah. Always disappoints me. I just want random things to happen. Okay. Let us gather more data and get more into the flow of things. Act 4, Scene 4. Enter Prince Edward, Audley, and others.
Audley, the arms of death embrace us round, and comfort have we none, save that to die we pay sore earnest for a sweeter life. At Cressy Field out clouds of warlock smoke choked up those French mouths and severed them, but now their multitudes of millions hide, masking as 'twere the beauteous burning sun, leaving no hope to us but sullen, dark, and eyeless terror of the all-ending night.
This sudden, mighty, and expedient head that they have made, fair prince, is wonderful. Before us in the valley lies the king, vantaged with all the heaven and earth can yield. His party stronger battled than our whole. His son, the braving Duke of Normandy, hath trimmed the mountain on our right hand up in shining plate, that now the aspiring hill shows like a silver quarry or an orb. Aloft that which the banners, bannerets, and new replenished pendants cuff the air and beat the winds, that for their gaudiness struggles to kiss them. On our left hand lies Philip, the younger issue of the king, coating the other hill in such array that all his gilded upright pikes do seem straight trees of gold, the pendants' leaves, and their device of antique heraldry, quartered in colors, seeming sundry fruits, makes it the orchard of the Hesperides. Behind us too the hill doth bear his height, for like a half moon, opening but one way, it rounds us in. There at our backs are lodged the fatal crossbows, and the battle there is governed by the rough Chatillon. Then thus it stands, the valley for our flight, the king binds in. The hills on either hand are proudly royalized by his sons, and on the hill behind stands certain death, in pay and service with Chatillon.
That's name is much more mighty than his deeds. Thy parcel in this power hath made it more, as many sands as these my hands can hold are but my handful of so many sands. Then all the world, and call it but a power, easily ta'en up and quickly thrown away. But if I stand to count them sand by sand, the number would confound my memory, and make 1,000 millions of a task, which briefly is no more, indeed, than one. These quarters, squadrons, and these regiments, before, behind us, and on either hand, are but a power. When we name a man, his hand, his foot, his head hath several strengths, and being all but one self-instant strength, why, all these many, Audley, is but one, and we can call it all but one man's strength. He that hath far to go tells it by miles. If he should tell the steps, it kills his heart. The drops are infinite that make a flood, and yet thou knowest we call it but a rain. There is but one France, one king of France. That France hath no more kings, and that same king hath but the puissant legion of one king. And we have one. Then apprehend no odds, for 1 to 1 is fair equality.
And enter a herald from King John.
What tidings, messenger? Be plain and brief.
The King of France, my sovereign lord and master, greets by me his foe, the Prince of Wales. If thou call forth 100 men of name, of lords, knights, squires, and English gentlemen, and with thyself and those kneel at his feet, he straight will fold his bloody colours up, and ransom shall redeem lives forfeited. If not, this day shall drink more English blood than e'er was buried in our British earth. What is the answer to this preferred mercy?
This heaven that covers France contains the mercy that draws from me submissive orisons. That such base breath should vanish from my lips, to urge the plea of mercy to a man, the Lord forbid. Return, and tell the king my tongue is made of steel, and he shall beg my mercy on his coward burgonet. Tell him my colours are as red as his, my men as bold, our English arms are strong. Return him my defiance in his face.
I go.
Exit, and then enter another completely different herald.
What news with thee?
The Duke of Normandy, my lord and master, pitying thy youth, is so ingirt with peril, by me hath sent a nimble-jointed jennet, as swift as ever yet thou didst bestride, and therewithal he counsels thee to fly, else death himself hath sworn that thou shalt die.
Back with the beast, and to the beast that sent him. Tell him I cannot sit a coward's horse. Bid him today bestride the jade himself, for I will stain my horse quite o'er with blood, and double gild my spurs, but I will catch him. So tell the carping boy, and get thee gone.
And exit herald. Enter another completely different herald.
Edward of Wales, Philip, the second son to the most mighty Christian king of France, seeing thy body's living date expired, and full of charity and Christian love, commends this book, full fraught with prayers, to thy fair hand and for thy hour of life. Entreats thee that thou meditate therein, and arm thy soul for her long journey towards. Thus have I done his bidding, and return.
Herald of Philip, greet thy lord from me. All good that he can send I can receive, but think'st thou not the unadvised boy hath wronged himself in thus far tendering on me? Happily he cannot pray without the book. I think him no divine extemporal, then render back this commonplace of prayer to do himself good in adversity. Beside, he knows not my sin's quality, and therefore knows no prayer for my avail. A night his prayer may be to pray to God, to put in my heart to hear his prayer. So tell the courtly wanton, and be gone.
I go.
And exit this completely different herald.
How confident their strength and number makes them. Now, Audley, sound those silver wings of thine, and let those milk-white messengers of time show thy time's learning in this dangerous time. Thyself art bruised and bit with many broils, and stratagems full past with iron pens are text in thine honourable face. Thou art a married man in this distress, but danger woos me as a blushing maid. Teach me an answer to this perilous time.
To die is all as common as to live. The one enchased, the other holds in chase. For from the instant we begin to live, we do pursue and hunt the time to die. First bud we, then we blow, and after seed, then presently we fall, and as a shade follows the body, so we follow death. If then we hunt for death, why do we fear it? If we fear it, why do we follow it? If we do fear, how can we shun it? If we do fear, with fear we do but aid the thing we fear to seize on us the sooner. If we fear not, then no resolved proffer can overthrow the limit of our fate, for whether ripe or rotten, drop we shall, as we do draw the lottery of our doom.
Ah, good old man, 1,000 armours, these words of thine have buckled on my back. Ha! What an idiot hast thou made of life to seek the thing it fears, and how disgraced the imperial victory of murdering death, since all the lives his conquering arrows strike seek him, and he not them, to shame his glory. I will not give a penny for a life, nor half a halfpenny to shun grim death, since for to live is but to seek to die, and dying but beginning of a new life. Let come the hour when he that rules it will, to live or die I hold indifferent.
And they exit, and it's another one of these scenes where we've got actually very, very few stage personnel being used. In theory, that we've got big martial actions being set up here, big events that could be played out with lots of people, but it's been set up by a scene with King John and Charles, literally two people, and then we have a scene that is two people on stage who are met by some other people who rattle in and out. So again, it's a play that's really, really wanting to keep the overall stage numbers of active players beyond supernumeraries down to the minimum. Again, as a structural analysis to look at properly at a later date. But yeah, we have this flow of things. Herald number 1, you yield or you're going to die. Herald number 2, would you like a horse? Herald number 3, would you like to pray? And he gives witty or well-considered responses to that, and then turns to his mate and says, actually, I'm quite scared, really. You look experienced in this kind of thing. Make me feel better. And he does. So yeah, thoughts in the room about this little sequence-ette, especially as it flows from the previous scene as well.
I think it was
Aliki.
yesterday, maybe it was the day before, Stephen was talking to us about this play as an exploration of chivalry. And I think I'll go with that. This is about honor and war and what is it all about and the different ways that people justify it to themselves or seek their own deaths or kill other people. Yeah, that's the theme. That's all I got.
No, I'm liking that. Other thoughts in the room? Elizabeth, then Valentina, then Eric.
I thought we had a sort of a compression of time in the last few scenes. I don't know if it's just me, but they feel like they've moved really rapidly. Like as we're going towards the end of the play, we're getting to a crescendo of events. Or maybe that was just me.
Yeah, it's true that we're bouncing from historical events that almost certainly were quite reasonably spaced out in terms of, certainly months are flying by, if not, longer. I don't know the precise timelines for some of these things, but the time is moving at pace really fast here. Valentina.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to yesterday and the scene in which King Edward is dealing with war and then seeing his son later on dealing with the same thing. I think it's quite nice to have the comparison. It's not like I don't think there's that many scenes in between. But yeah, to see the comparison of how the two men are dealing with this stuff.
Yes, you have a slightly ruthless father going, let's see how they cope with this situation. And this is a younger man doing all the things that he needs to do in public, but privately there's something going on behind, just going, ooh, this is a little actually outside my comfort zone. Eric?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that it's sort of like what we were debating yesterday, whether the mariner and the Frenchman are the same person. And I mean, same actor, maybe even. But then, I don't know, would it just be one person changing hats? Or would it just be, even changing costumes? I don't know.
Well, it was interesting. I wasn't plugging for the mariner and the Frenchman to be the herald in this scene. I was actually thinking, I was just wondering, do they double with Audley? Because actually Audley's speech there actually had a certain similar quality of tone to it in places. But yeah, obviously we wouldn't go for such extreme doubling. We would actually have different actors playing the herald. I just do that for my own personal amusement, so that I can do a funny. Rachael.
I don't think Audley and the heralds double just because he speaks twice in this scene, and I think that's just there so that the actor has to wait for the cue, and so he's always standing at attention.
I meant to the mariner earlier in the play. Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Other thoughts? Elizabeth?
I really liked Briony playing all three heralds. I saw a Briony on stage, like walking in and then kind of like walking out again and then walking back again. And whenever you said it was a completely different herald and it was Briony again, I thought that's actually quite comedic. It's quite, it adds sort of a lift to that moment in the text.
Yeah, lots of hats. Because especially as they should really be coming from quite radically different directions as well. Because one's coming from the enemy, and the other two are coming from slightly different areas of his forces. So yeah. Any other thoughts before we go into the next scene? Briony.
It's not the most new thought. It's the first time it's been brought up today, but I'm just still really, really enjoying the language and like the way it's so poetic, even though it's not, it's grim, bloody war, but it's still somehow really beautifully written.
Other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, let's go on to Act 4, Scene 5. Enter King John of France and Charles.
The usual thing has happened where my script has disappeared.
It
will talk for a second more.
That's all right. We're not rushing. I'm just going to try and think of something. It's interesting. I've in the edition I'm looking at it, they've added Prince to Charles, and I couldn't say Prince Charles, and not without raising other thoughts and references to my mind.
Yes, that is awkward. I'm just scrolling down as fast as I can.
Yeah. So Act 4, Scene 5. Again, not a lot. We've literally only got two people noted, and we've had this in previous acts as well, where it's King John and an other on stage, to represent almost the entire French forces. So it's an interesting continuation. That isn't to say there aren't additional supernumeraries and things going on here, but that's not necessarily the requirement.
Okay. Act 4. Yes?
Scene 5.
Scene 5. Was that the last scene of the act?
Probably.
'Cause I just got myself into.
No, there is another
There's
scene
a
to follow,
scene.
but I don't think it's
Okay,
a sudden darkness have to face the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely. Okay, are we ready to go?
Seconds. A sudden darkness hath defaced the sky. The winds are crept into the caves for fear. The leaves move not. The world is hushed and still. The birds cease singing, and the wandering brooks murmur no wonted greeting to their shores. Silence attends some wonder, and expecteth that heaven should pronounce some prophecy. Where or from whom proceeds this silence, Charles?
Our men, with open mouths and staring eyes, look on each other as they did attend each other's words, and yet no creature speaks. A tongue-tied fear hath made a midnight hour, and speechless sleep through all the waking regions.
But now the pompous sun in all his pride looked through his golden coach upon the world, and on a sudden hath he hid himself, that now the under earth is as a grave, dark, deadly, silent and uncomfortable.
And I was going to attempt to do this, but I'm just going to say the words. A clamour of ravens.
Ah, what deadly outcry do I hear?
Here comes my brother Philip.
All dismayed.
Enter Philip.
What fearful words are those thy looks presage?
Flight! A flight!
Coward, what flight? Thou liest. There needs no flight.
A flight!
Awake thy craven powers, and tell on the substance of that very fear indeed, which is so ghastly printed in thy face. What is the matter?
Flight of ugly ravens do croak and hover over our soldiers' heads, keep in triangles and cornered squares, right as our forces are embattled. With their approach there came this sudden fog, which now hath hid the airy floor of heaven, and made at noon a night unnatural upon the quaking and dismayed world. In brief, our soldiers have let fall their arms, and stand like metamorphosed images, bloodless and pale, one gazing on another.
Aye, now I call to mind the prophecy. But I must give no entrance to a fear. Return, and hearten up these yielding souls. Tell them, the ravens, seeing them in arms, so many fair against a famished few, come but to dine upon their handiwork, and prey upon the carrion that they kill. For when we see a horse laid down to die, although he be not dead, the ravenous birds sit watching the departure of his life. Even so, these are ravens for the carcasses of those poor English that are marked to die, hover about. And if they cry to us, 'tis but for meat that we must kill for them. Away and comfort up my soldiers, and sound the trumpets. And at once dispatch this little business of a silly fraud.
And exit Philip. Another noise. Salisbury brought in by a French captain.
Behold, my liege, this knight and 40 more, of whom the better part are slain and fled, with all endeavour sought to break our ranks and make their way to the encompassed prince. Dispose of him, as please your majesty.
Go, and the next bough, soldier, that thou seest, disgrace it with his body presently. For I do hold a tree in France too good to be the gallows of an English thief.
My lord of Normandy, I have your pass and warrant for my safety through this land.
Villiers procured it for thee, did he not?
He did.
And it is current. Thou shalt freely pass.
Aye, freely to the gallows, to be hanged without denial or impediment. Away with him.
I hope your highness will not so disgrace me, and dash the virtue of my sealed arms. He hath my never broken name to show, charactered in with this princely hand of mine, and rather let me leave to be a prince, than break the stable verdict of a prince. I do beseech you, let him pass in quiet.
Thou and thy word lie both in my command. What canst thou promise that I cannot break? Which of these twain is greater infamy, to disobey thy father or thyself? Thy word, nor no man's may exceed his power. Nor that same man doth never break his word that keeps it to the utmost of his power. The breach of faith dwells in the soul's consent, which if thyself without consent do break, thou art not charged with the breach of faith. Go hang him, for thy license lies in me, and my constraint stands the excuse for thee.
What? Am I not a soldier in my word? Then arms adieu, and let me fight and let them fight that list. Shall I not give my girdle from my waist? But with a guardian I shall be controlled, to say I may not give my things away? Upon my soul, had Edward, Prince of Wales, engaged his word, writ down his noble hand, for all your knights to pass his father's land, the royal king, to grace his warlike son, would not alone safe conduct them give to them, but with all bounty feasted them and theirs.
Dwellst thou on precedence? Then be it so. Say, Englishman, of what degree thou art?
An earl in England, though a prisoner here, and those that know me call me Salisbury.
Then, Salisbury, say whether thou art bound.
To Calais, where my liege, King Edward is.
To Calais, Salisbury. Then to Calais back, and bid the king prepare a noble grave to put his princely son, Black Edward, in. And as thou travellest westward from this place, some 2 leagues hence, there is a lofty hill whose top seems topless, for the embracing sky doth hide his high head in her azure bosom, upon whose tall top, when thy foot attains, look back upon the humble vale beneath. Humble of late, but now made proud with arms, and thence behold the wretched Prince of Wales, hooped with a bond of iron round about. After which sight to Calais spur amain, and say the prince was smothered and not slain. And tell the king this is not all his ill, for I will greet him ere he thinks I will. Away, be gone. The smoke but of our shot will choke our foes, though bullets hit them not.
And they exit. So a clamour of ravens. I'm wondering how one does a clamour of ravens. I mean, beyond just going behind from off. Is there a more effective way? I have various bird callers, but I don't know if I've got raven. And whether there's a mechanical method of imitating them. Just a thought. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just now thinking of the logistics of doing a clamour of ravens and how one does that. I don't know. Other bird callers are available. Lynn.
So to comment on this scene, quite apart from the ravens problem, I noticed that it is a sort of a repeat of the scene between Charles himself and Villiers, where Villiers has to persuade Charles that, no, we need to do the honorable thing, the chivalric thing, and I will go back and surrender myself. And then Charles changes his mind and says, oh, okay, I'll do the prisoner exchange. And then that scene is that dynamic is reiterated here, where the king says, I don't care what you do, we're going to execute him, and his son has to persuade him to do the honorable thing. So the slightly lower status character has to persuade the higher status character to do the right and chivalric thing, and the higher status character ends up consenting. There's got to be something going on there for that basically that same scene that seemed to be repeated twice in pretty close succession, but I don't have a take on what that purpose is.
Aliki.
Treading very carefully here, I'm going to say that it's a pre-battle scene about who is responsible for what, and whether the king has the ultimate responsibility for what happens in a battle or not.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Helen agrees there. There was, or whether that was saying to chat. I don't know. You're muted at the moment, so I don't know.
I don't see that because I don't see a problem because all the commanders are taking responsibility for what's going on without any apparent problems at all. In fact, they think battles are, and fighting is on the whole a good thing, and death is, well, provided it's in an honourable way. I think this is about honour, not about responsibility. It's a big debate on whether you kill your prisoners.
Aliki, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, I agree that it's about honor, but I think it's also about responsibility, whether your honor is your own or belongs to your liege.
Ah, yeah, that too.
Because there's a certain effrontery there of he's my prisoner. Surely I have the right to dispose of him. An agreement has been made here. You can't unilaterally just make these decisions. There should be some consultation period at least. I am possibly going too far on that, Helen.
Yeah, war has rules. I mean, even before Grotius, war had its rules. And this is what you did with prisoners. I mean, the common sort, boys, men, whatever, that wasn't so important. But anybody who was captured had, unless they could be proved to have acted dishonorably, had the right to ransom, if they could.
Mm. Eric, were you waving earlier?
Yeah, I was just going to say that sort of also killing prisoners depends on their status because, of course, leverage, negotiation. But, yeah, I don't know. It just seems an interesting scene. If it's... also because King John, before we saw him, he didn't get involved in the actual fighting before. He just sort of went, go off and kill things, or go off and don't get killed. If you don't get killed, come back and tell me what's going on. So it's interesting, like this shift here.
Yes, a slightly redundant part of the message there as well. All he needed to say would be, tell me what happened. If they get killed, then you don't need to remind them that. Sorry, Aliki.
Going back to the subject of honor, maybe it's that scene in the movie that shows you that the bad guys are bad, Look, this king is really dishonorable. He's going to break one of the basic rules. It's okay to defeat him because...
But he doesn't.
But he doesn't, but he wants to. He is only persuaded out of it by his son.
Yeah. His son, who had to be persuaded out of being dishonorable just 2 scenes earlier.
Yeah, so there's a sort of domino of people being persuaded into doing things that they shouldn't need to be persuaded into doing.
Why do I now expect a parallel on the English side?
It's interesting. We've been asking. I asked the other day whether there was a parallel about how they were discussing their allies as well, because there was a bit when there was a sort of casual insults about the allies of your enemy. I don't know if there was a parallel of that, and I'm just wondering whether there are direct parallels being played between the two sides that often, or whether it's a little more, a little different. An open question which I do not expect an answer. That is fine. People can have their own thoughts. It's all allowed. Any other thoughts before we move on? What's going to happen? Who's going to survive? Is everyone going to make it to the end? Anyone could die here, people. Anyone could. Just because it's history. Just because it's history, that's not an excuse. Okay, Act 4, Scene 6. There is an alarum. Enter Prince Edward and Artois.
How fares your grace? Are you not shot, my lord?
No, dear Artois, but choked with dust and smoke and stepped aside for breath and fresh air.
Breathe, then, and to it again. The amazed French are quite distracted with gazing on the crows. And were our quivers full of shafts again, your grace should see a glorious day of this. Oh, for more arrows, Lord, that's our want.
Courage, Artois, a fig for feathered shafts, when feathered fowls do bend on our side. What need we fight and sweat and keep a coil when railing crows outscold our adversaries? Up, up, Artois, the ground itself is armed with fire containing flint. Command our bows to hurl away their pretty coloured hue, and to it with stones. Away, Artois, away! My soul does prophesy we win the day.
And they exeunt. There's an alarum. Enter King John.
Our multitudes are in themselves confounded, dismayed and distraught. Swift starting fear hath buzzed a cold dismay throughout our army, and every petty disadvantage prompts the fear-possessed abject souls to fly. Myself, whose spirit is steel to their dull lead, what with recalling of this prophecy and that our native stones from English arms rebel against us, find myself attainted with strong surprise of weak, yielding fear.
And enter Charles.
Fly, father, fly! The French do kill the French. Some that would stand let drive at some that fly. Our drums strike nothing but discouragement. Our trumpets sound dishonor and retire. The spirit of fear that feareth not but death cowardly works confusion on itself.
Enter Philip.
Look out your eyes and see not this day's shame. An arm hath beaten an army. One poor David hath with a stone foiled 20 stout Goliaths. Some 20 naked starvelings with small flints hath driven back a puissant horde's host of men, arrayed and fenced in all accompaniments.
Mordieu, they quaked at us and kill us up. No less than 40,000 wicked elders have fought the lean slaves this day, stoned to death.
Oh, that I were some other countryman. This day hath set derision on the French, and all the world will blurt and scorn at us.
What, is there no hope left?
No hope but death to bury up our shame.
Make up once more with me the 20th part of those that live are men now to quail the feeble handful on the adverse part.
Then charge again. If heaven be not opposed, we cannot lose the day.
On, away!
And they exit. Enter Audley, wounded and rescued by 2 squires.
How fares my lord?
Even as a man may do that dines at such a bloody feast as this.
I hope, my lord, there is no mortal scar.
No matter if it be, the count is cast, and in the worst ends but a mortal man. Good friends, convey me to the princely Edward, that in the crimson bravery of my blood I may become him with saluting him. I'll smile and tell him that this open scar doth end the harvest of his Audley's war.
And they exit. It's really interesting scene. The continuing of the birds. It's like the birds are omnipresent now, isn't it? That they're standing over the French and just going at them. There's lots of thing about sound. Drums strike nothing but discouragement. Trumpets sound dishonor and retire. There's almost the intimation of a full-on soundscape going on here, as well as your usual battle things. There's something slightly more going on here. For again, a scene that doesn't actually utilise that many people. There's no indication, I think, in the stage directions that there are multitudes coming on with the king or these other people. It's one person and one person and one person and one person and one person. So that isn't to say there aren't more people there, but it does seem interestingly about the impression of battle, and that it's coming through sounds and stuff that you can do off stage to add to what's going on stage. I find that really interesting and useful. Eric?
Well, yeah, I guess it makes sense because they can't stage the battle. It's like the scene we had with, I think, in Solomon and Persida, where they were describing the jousts. And you could, you would hear them sort of, sounding the tourney balls. I can't remember if it's tourney, but anyway. The trumpets, and then they would sort of describe the sort of what was going on as well.
Yeah, and we've got this in other in battle scenes in Tamburlaine. For a play that's got lots of quite big set piece things going on. The actual battles are quite muted. There's people sitting essentially having a tea party while the battle's happening off stage. And so I wonder whether a similar thing is built into this text, is that it can be staged with lots and lots of people, but it might be designed to contract to something quite small. Again, full breakdown will be required to actually make sense whether that works or not. Briony.
But yeah, it's interesting, like you say, because it's that much more immersive than just people on stage talking about fighting that's going on off stage. It's a bit more sensory, and the poetry adds to that as well, and the sense of chaos of having people coming on stage like this messenger, this herald, and then that herald, and then another herald, and just the chaos of it, and like the tightening up of the pressure with the pace and stuff. It seems to work really nicely.
Other thoughts? Aliki.
I'm going to go back to your soundscape along with what Briony just said and what Eric was talking about in the chats about how quick the entrances and exits are, would really be incredibly atmospheric. And it gives you a sense that maybe some of the lines are shouted across the stage as they approach each other, and others are like one of the French king's speeches really felt like it was almost entirely internal to me. And people kind of lost in their own, it creates a psychological sense of people lost in the chaos trying to find each other, which is really beautiful, I think.
It's giving me really nice ideas now for what a production of this might look like. Whereas earlier I wasn't quite sure what mode it might play, but now this is giving me a sort of routine that I'm liking. Helen, then Eric.
I've suddenly realised what's missing here. I mean, I don't miss it at all, but I would have expected that at some point there would be a cobbler collecting shoes. Or something of that type. Some clown, some lowlife, some soldier, but we don't have the voice of the common man caught up in the battle.
Well, we do have the voice of common people, but they're not being played as semi-comic characters. We do have them earlier as witnesses.
Yes.
And that's quite different to some of the other plays that we've worked with, where
refugee citizens.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're not collecting boots and shoes on the battlefield for use for sale later.
There doesn't seem to be that cynical quality to the text in that sense. There may be layers to it, but it doesn't seem to have that sort of built-in layer of cynicism about why people are doing things, perhaps. Eric and Rachael.
I was just going to say about the Ravens, where, like, if you do it in a closed indoor theater, you can have, because of surround sound, you have that. Or if you do it as an audio play, you can just throw the sound like everywhere. So it sounds like, they are actually present.
Yeah, and actually the signifiers for the French side is they're beset by birds, whereas the English it'll be a much crisper, cleaner sound of the victorious, and it's giving so many options. I'm liking options. Rachael.
No, because it's like verse. I was wondering if you could keep instead of when crows or ravens are together in a murder, how they're all chattering like that, you could have it maybe as just a sound that comes in, just a singular one or whatever, and then it grows, go like, and just keep it for the scenes until they charge, because a bunch of them, ravens and crows, they do sound vaguely human-like, and then the sound of a whole army as they're charging, if it was like something that was increasing in frequency or sound, the crows that then broke into that sound in the chaos, because they're speaking and there is that like double meaning of like poetry that they're using in the scene, like fly and pluck out your eyes. You don't even want to see it. And it sounds like, even though they're retreating, it sounds like they're already being picked apart by these birds, and that these birds have gathered together because they're not on any side except death's side, and they're there to just pick out whatever they can from how Helen was saying why there's nobody there to take the shoes or something, that these characters are kind of like a diabolical thing there to take whatever they can get from these corpses.
Yes, no, there's nobody collecting shoes because the birds are already taking them. And yes, the sound of any bird within that family, those sounds can distort in really nice ways as well. You can take them in the direction of sounding a bit like speech, but you can also make them blur into sounds of war. They're a really nice range of sounds to be doing quite scary stage things with. And I like that very much, Eric.
Well, we focused a lot on the ravens, but what I really like in this is sort of Audley's description of going, yeah, if I'm going to die, I mean, just take me to the king and I'll smile and tell him that this open scar doth end the harvest of his Audley's war. It's just a very, I don't know, we don't know if he's going to get a death speech or even if he's going to die, but it just, I don't know, I enjoyed that line.
Yeah, and and we get quite nondescript stage directions as well, like another noise. Now, is it a repeat of that, or is it a different noise? Or it could be trumpet. Sometimes you get these ambiguous things that make us wonder. Any other thoughts about these unhappy French? I see no ships. So we will go and final scene of as labelled in Act 4, Scene 7. Though you could break up these scenes quite radically. You could break that last few scenes into quite a few individual units if you so wished. That's quite an artificial unit of action. In many ways. So Act 4, Scene 7, enter Prince Edward, King John, Charles and all with ensigns spread.
Now, John in France, and lately John of France, thy bloody ensigns are my captive colours, and you, high vaunting Charles of Normandy, that once today sent me a horse to fly, are now the subjects of my clemency. Fie, lords, is it not a shame that English boys, whose early days are yet not worth a beard, should in the bosom of your kingdom thus, 1 against 20, beat you up together?
Thy fortune, not thy force, hath conquered us.
An argument that heaven aids the right.
And enter Artois with Philip.
See, Artois doth bring with him along the late good counsel giver to my soul. Welcome, Artois, and welcome, Philip, too, who now of you or I have need to pray. Now is the proverb verified in you, to brighter morning breeds a lorring day.
Sound trumpets, enter Audley.
But say, what grim discouragement comes here? Alas, what 1,000 armed men of France have writ that note of death in Audley's face? Speak, thou that wooest death in thy careless smile, and looked so merrily upon thy grave, as if thou were enamoured of thine end. What hungry sword has so bereaved thy face, and lopped a true friend from my loving soul?
O Prince, thy sweet bemoaning speech to me is as a mournful knell to one dead sick.
Dear Audley, if my tongue ring out thy end, my arms shall be thy grave. What may I do to win thy life, or to revenge thy death? If thou wilt drink the blood of captive kings, or that it were restorative, command a health of king's blood, and I'll drink to thee. In honour may dispense for thee with death, the never dying honour of this day. Share wholly, Audley, for thyself, and live.
Victorious Prince, that thou art so, behold, a Caesar's fame in king's captivity. If I could hold him, death but at a bay, Till I see my liege thy royal father, my soul should yield this castle of my flesh, this mangled tribute, with all willingness to darkness, consumption, dust, and worms.
Cheerily, bold man, thy soul is all too proud to yield her city for one little breach. Should be divorced from her earthly spouse by the soft temper of a Frenchman's sword? Lo, to repair thy life, I give to thee 3,000 marks a year in English land.
I take thy gift to pay the debts I owe. These two poor esquires redeemed me from the French, with lusty and dear hazard of their lives. What thou hast given me, I give to them, and as thou lovest me, Prince, lay thy consent to this bequeath in my last testament.
Renowned Audley, live, and have from me this gift twice double to these esquires and thee. But live or die, what thou hast given away to these and theirs shall lasting freedom stay. Come, gentlemen, I will see my friend bestowed in an easy litter, then will march proudly towards Calais with triumph pace unto my royal father, and there bring the tribute of my wars, fair France, his king.
And they exit. Audley had gotten a bit of a scrape there, but it's the day is theirs. Doesn't mean that there isn't some cost to them on some level. It was hard fighting. It was a desperate situation, but they were saved by the birds. Possibly, maybe we're overstating the birds. By the way, I just made maybe. Briony, then Rachael.
I'm a bit confused. So are Philip and Artois the esquires, or because he's been really frugal about not bringing people randomly on stage for no reason, but Artois and Philip come on and do nothing, and then the scene ends, but they're talking about these esquires, but I thought they were different people. I don't know what's happening there.
I don't think they're referring to the esquires that Dan read earlier.
Artois appeared very early on as effectively a French defector who was given an English earldom. And Philip is one of the French royal family. So they're there as prisoners rather than anything else. The esquires who are referred to are the people slightly lower down the social scale who've actually assisted Audley.
Yeah, so presumably, yes. So maybe they are the people helping Audley on there, yes. So maybe those two esquires that we met in the previous have literally helped carry him on.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah, that's a note. I like that. That seems reasonable. We will go back to the ordinary service in a second. Helen, then go to Rachael.
It is fairly traditional that you honour somebody by promoting their subordinates. This was quite well recognised.
I mean, it's still not a huge scene in terms of numbers on stage, but they are most of the characters on stage. They are necessary because they're named parts who matter, and they have been involved in the action that we've had before. It's not like we're adding an additional bonus characters. They have been involved in the action. But Rachael, then Eric.
We've seen so much of Prince Edward today. I feel like much more than the other 2 days, and I think just the comparison with Philip and Charles, the French ones, because there's something, I don't know, it feels like that Edward is stepping up. I mean, this is Edward III, and here we have somebody who might have been Edward the IV, and there it starts. I don't know. We're seeing some development here I think, that he's stepping up and the other two, when they have to step up, run away. Some, I don't know, contrast between the prince characters.
Eric?
But yeah, also we had, I was going to make a separate point, but yeah, to sort of follow on from that, we had the pelican scene yesterday where, like, you know, sort of, hey, what did you find? Look, I found this. With the pelican and the whole, you know, abandoning him because he has 7 other sons and so on and so forth. I was just going to say it's very interesting that there isn't any clarification whether Audley actually dies here. I mean, I'm guessing we're going to find out soon. But
he's not well.
Yeah, it's like sort of my soul should yield this castle of my flesh, and he's like holding on until he gets to the king, as far as I can tell. But it's not clear if they just sort of. Well, I mean, Prince Edward does say, you know, I will see my friend bestowed in an easy litter, but then is he going to die on the way? Is he? I just have many questions about this.
Well, I'm wondering is that, you know, because they said the Esquire said in the previous scene, I hope, my lord, that is no mortal scar. So I'm hoping for a really, you know, big, proper wound, graphic injury detail being applied here, and I don't know whether there's time to do that between scenes for when Audley is seen before that, but yeah, I'm starting to get quite into the special effects for this now. Lynn.
Yeah, the effect of this scene, whether we ever find out whether Audley dies or not, is it's again modeling chivalry. Audley is mortally wounded, and I just want to stay alive long enough to see my king, and then I'll gladly render up my soul. And oh, the gift that you're going to bestow on me, I want to pass on to these brave young men who helped me. So he's, you know, noble and fearless and brave and courageous till the last.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting follow-up thought about on the chivalry ideas and thoughts about honour, but maybe at the end of the play, in case I spoil the witnesses. Other thoughts on this? We have one more act to go. I say one more act to go. This is an entirely artificial breakdown of the units of action, and we only have one scene labelled for Act 5, so it's we basically have one scene left to go before we get to the end of the play. We may pause midway through it, I don't know. Any other thoughts before we dive into that particular unit of action? No. Okay, let's go into what is called here Act 5, Scene 1. Enter King Edward, Queen Philippa, Derby, and soldiers.
No more, Queen Philip. Pacify yourself. Copland, except he can excuse his fault, shall find displeasure written in our looks. And now, onto this proud resisting town. Soldiers assault. I will no longer stay to be deluded by their false delays. Put all to sword. Make the spoil your own.
And enter 6 citizens in their shirts, barefoot, with halters about their necks, who say in unison,
Mercy, King Edward. Mercy, gracious lord.
Contemptuous villains, call ye now for truce. Mine ears are stopped against your bootless cries. Sound, drums alarum, draw threatening swords.
Ah, noble prince, take pity on this town, and hear us, mighty king. We claim the promise that your highness made. The 2 days' respite is not yet expired, and we are come with willingness to bear what torturing death or punishment you please, so that the trembling multitude must be saved.
My promise. Well, I do confess as much, but I do require the chiefest citizens and men of most account that should submit. You, peradventure, are but servile grooms, or some felonious robbers on the sea, whom apprehended law would execute, albeit severity lay dead in us. He cannot but overreach us thus.
The sun, dread lord, that in the western full behold us now, low brought through misery, did in the orient purple of the morn salute our coming forth, when we were known. Or may our portion be with damned fiends.
If it be so, then let our covenant stand. We take possession of the town in peace. But for yourselves, look you for no remorse. As imperial justice hath decreed, your body shall be dragged about these walls, and after feel the stroke of quartering steel. This is your doom. Go, soldiers, see it done.
Be more mild unto these yielding men. It is a glorious thing to establish peace, and kings approach the nearest unto God by giving life and safety unto men. As thou intendest to be king of France, so let her people live to call thee king. For what the sword cuts down or fire hath spoiled is held in reputation none of ours.
Although experience teaches this is true, that peaceful quietness brings most delight when most of all abuses are controlled. Yet, in so much it shall be known that we as well can master our affections, as conquer other by the dint of sword. Philip, prevail. We yield to thy request. These men shall live to boast of clemency, and tyranny strike terror to thyself.
Long live your highness. Happy be your reign.
You'll get you hence. Return unto the town. And if this kindness hath deserved your love, learn then to reverence Edward as your king.
Exeunt citizens.
Now, might we hear of our affairs abroad, we would, till gloomy winter were o'erspent, dispose our men in garrison a while. Who comes here?
And we're just going to pause there because I just wanted to thoroughly digest that little unit of action, the Burghers of Calais. We touched on them the other day, and we return to this. And it's an interesting question as how much of a documentary is this scene in terms of the action there, Lynn?
Well, yeah, Helen said she was looking for a parallel scene, and I would say here it is, that the king wants to do the wrong, cruel, dishonorable thing, and someone talks him out of it, and he relents. So that's very similar to the scenes we've seen between Charles and Villiers, and then between the king and his son Charles. So here we have the higher status character going to do the wrong thing. Someone below them in the hierarchy says, don't do that.
Stephen?
Well, just to add to that, mastering his affections puts me in mind of what happened with the Countess too. That there's this, not in the sense that he actually did master his affections necessarily, but that this is the sign of both a real man and a true king, is that they rule themselves. I mean, it's a bit equivocal, isn't it? Because he isn't really, but he knows that that's the impression he wants this to give.
I mean, it's also a question of how much of this is semi-stage managed in advance as well. We've had scenes in these plays before where the possibility of prearranged stage management to say, what will my mercy be like? No, death, no death today. And to demonstrate that decision-making process is part of the thing of saying, well, any other king would have just killed you, but actually, no, I listen. I'm a listening king. Eric?
I was going to say if, the queen, well, because obviously it's the first time she appears, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the third woman has stepped onto the stage.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see if she has the same, sort of power as before, as the Countess did. because the Countess did sort of go, I'm not going to engage in this sort of affair, and that was why we liked her. She resisted, whereas Queen Philippa has a different role, I guess. And also, would it be the same actor? That's what I'm wondering. Just like waiting however many scenes just just to sort of reappear.
Well, there's no reason why it should be, unless it's deliberately designed for a limited touring setup where you don't have as many boy actors perhaps on tour. But I that's a massive leap from me there on that point. Yeah, it's interesting that King Edward, they're obviously mid-conversation as they enter, going, yes, I thank you for reminding me of that minor plot point that was mentioned in a few scenes earlier, but I'll come to that. I've got this other plot point to wrap up first. So yeah, it's interesting. Other thoughts? Okay, we're still mid-scene, obviously. I'm breaking this artificially up because we have the entrance of here, Copland, as mentioned at the top of the scene, and King David of Scotland, who I don't think actually says anything, but he's there. Oh, and Darby, who I get, Eric, I was wrong. You do have a line as Darby. I apologise. You are still Darby, as well as Queen Philippa.
Copland, my lord, and David, King of Scots.
Was this the proud, presumptuous Esquire of the North that would not yield his prisoner to my queen?
I am, my liege, a northern esquire indeed, but neither proud nor insolent, I trust.
What moved thee then to be so obstinate to contradict our royal queen's desire?
No wilful disobedience, mighty lord, but my desert and public law at arms. I took the king myself in single fight, and like a soldier would be loath to lose the least preeminence that I had won. And Copland, straight upon your highness' charge, is come to France, and with a lowly mind doth veil the bonnet of his victory. Receive, dread lord, the custom of my fraught, the wealthy tribute of my laboring hands, which should long since have been surrendered up, had but your grace's gracious self been there in place.
But Copland, thou didst scorn the king's command, neglecting our commission in his name.
His name I reverence, but his person more. His name shall keep me in allegiance still, but to his person I will bend my knee.
I pray thee, Philip, let displeasure pass. This man doth please me. I like his words. But what is he that will attempt great deeds and lose the glory that ensues the same? Oh, rivers have recourse unto the sea, and Copland's faith relation to his king. Kneel, therefore, down. Now rise, King Edward's knight, and to maintain thy state, I freely give 500 marks a year to thee and thine.
Enter Salisbury.
Welcome, Lord Salisbury. What news from Britain?
This, mighty king, the country we have won, and John de Mountford, regent of that place, presents your highness with this coronet, protesting true allegiance to your grace.
We thank thee for thy service, valiant earl. Challenge our favour, for we owe it thee.
But now, my lord, as this is joyful news, so must my voice be tragical again, and I must sing of doleful accidents.
What of our man the overthrow at Poitiers, or is our son beset with too much odds?
He was, my lord, and as my worthless self, with 40 other serviceable knights, under safe conduct of the Dauphin's seal, did travail that way, finding him distressed, a troop of lances met us on the way, surprised and brought us prisoners to the king, who, proud of this, and eager of revenge, commanded straight to cut off all our heads, and surely we had died, but that the Duke, more full of honour than his angry sire, procured our quick deliverance from thence. But ere we went, salute your king, quoth he. Bid him provide a funeral for his son. Today our sword shall cut his thread of life, and, sooner than he thinks, will be with him, to quittance those displeasures he hath done. This said, we passed, not daring to reply. Our hearts were dead, our looks diffused and wan. Wandering at last we climbed unto a hill, from whence, although our grief were much before, yet now to see the occasion with our eyes did thrice so much increase our heaviness. For there, my lord, oh, there we did descry, down in a valley, how both armies lay. The French had cast their trenches like a ring, and every barricado's open front was thick embossed with brazen ordnance. Here stood a battail of 10,000 horse, there twice as many pikes in quadrant wise, here crossbows and deadly wounding darts, and in the midst, like to a slender point, within the compass of the horizon, as 'twere a rising bubble in the sea, a hazel wand amidst a wood of pines, or as a bear fast chained unto a stake, stood famous Edward, still expecting when those dogs of France would fasten on his flesh. Anon the death-procuring knell begins. Off go the cannons, that with trembling noise did shake the very mountain where they stood. Then sound the trumpet's clangor in the air, the battles join, and, when we could no more discern the difference twixt the friend and foe, so intricate the dark confusion was, away we turned our watery eyes with sighs, as black as powder fuming into smoke. And thus, I fear, unhappy have I told the most untimely tale of Edward's fall.
Me, is this my welcome into France? Is this the comfort that I look to have when I should meet with my beloved son? Sweet Ned, I would thy mother in the sea had been prevented of this mortal grief.
Content thee, Philip. 'Tis not tears will serve to call him back if he be taken hence. Comfort thyself as I do, gentle queen, with hope of sharp, unheard of, dire revenge. He bids me to provide his funeral, and so I will. But all the peers in France shall mourners be, and weep out bloody tears, until their empty veins be dry and sere. The pillars of his hearse shall be his bones, the mould that covers him, their city ashes. His knell, the groaning cries of dying men, and in the stead of tapers on his tomb, 150 towers shall burning blaze, while we bewail our valiant son's decease.
After a flourish sounded within, enter an herald.
Rejoice, my lord! Ascend the imperial throne, the mighty and redoubted Prince of Wales, great servitor to bloody Mars in arms, the Frenchman's terror and his country's fame, triumphant rideth like a Roman peer, and lowly at his stirrup comes afoot King John of France, together with his son, in captive bonds, whose diadem he brings to crown thee with, and to proclaim thee king.
Away with mourning, Philip. Wipe thine eyes. Sound trumpets. Welcome in, Plantagenet.
Enter Prince Edward, King John, Philip, Audley, Artois, and anyone else that we have forgotten.
As things long lost when they are found again, so doth my son rejoice his father's heart, from whom even now my soul was much perplexed.
Be this a token to express my joy, for inward passion will not let me speak.
My gracious father, here receive the gift. This wreath of conquest and reward of war, got with as mickle peril of our lives, as e'er was thing of price before this day. Install your highness in your proper right. And herewithal I render to your hands these prisoners, chief occasion of our strife.
Sir John of France, see you keep your word. You promised to be sooner with ourself than we did think for. 'Tis so indeed. But had you done at first as now ye do, how many civil towns had stood untouched that now are turned to ragged heaps of stones? How many people's lives mightst thou have saved that are untimely sunk into their graves?
Duard, recount not things irrevocable. Tell me what ransom thou requires to have.
My ransom, John, hereafter shall be known. First to England thou must cross the seas to see what entertainment it affords. Where it falls, it cannot be so bad as ours hath been since we arrived in France.
Cursed man! This I was foretold, but did misconster what the prophet told.
Now, father, this petition Edward makes to thee, whose grace hath been his strongest shield, that, as thy pleasure chose me for the man to be the instrument to show thy power, so thou wilt grant that many princes more, bred and brought up within that little isle, may still be famous for like victories. And for my part, the bloody scars I bear, and weary nights that I have watched in field, the dangerous conflicts I have often had, the fearful menaces were proffered me, the heat and cold, and what else might displease, I wish were now redoubled 20-fold, so that hereafter ages, when they read the painful traffic of my tender youth, might thereby be inflamed with such resolve as not the territories of France alone, but likewise Spain, Turkey, and what countries else that justly would provoke fair England's ire might, at their presence, tremble and retire.
Yeah, the English lords, we do proclaim a rest, an intercession of our painful arms. Sheathe up your swords, refresh your weary limbs, peruse your spoils. And after we have breathed a day or two within this haven town, God willing, then for England we'll be shipped, where in a happy hour I trust we shall arrive, 3 kings, 2 princes, and a queen.
Excellent. So yes, this is very much loose ends tying here. We have a series of loose ends being tied. The Burghers Calais. Then we've got the Copland element being tied off, and then Salisbury comes in, delivers a beautiful speech that is just slightly wrong. And the king gets to demonstrate that he does care. He didn't, when he didn't save his son earlier, it was out of, he was a good father for that, but he does care deep down. And then awkward moment as a herald turns up and says, "Hey, everything's fine," and we get a happy reunion. So yes, it's I say it's a scene sort of tidying up any loose ends. I don't know if there are any anything outstanding from the latter end of the play that we need to address, or other thoughts about this final act, Lynn.
I don't know about he does care after all.
I may have exaggerated for effect.
I'm just going to point out that he tells his queen, "Don't be sad. I'm basically going to conduct a scorched earth campaign to revenge my son's death." So his reaction is not to grieve, "Oh, I love my son and now he's gone." It's like, "I'm mad and they killed my son and now I'm going to go kill a bunch of them." So his grief is expressed in an interesting way.
Yeah, we've met people who respond to grief in similar ways. Again, going back to Tamburlaine of that whole that there's a certain actually, we have it in Woodstock as well. Richard does some Bernie stuff upon news of loss of his wife. Yes, some people react very badly to such news in ways that only hurt others. Other thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, it sort of exposes the tension with chivalry, doesn't it? Because chivalry is basically a sort of one-on-one combat code, effectively. It's knight v knight, and so you can have the sort of the good old chivalric days, but on top of that, you've got a vision of warfare which is strikingly modern, strikingly contemporary, isn't it? Which is not about there's this kind of interlude in sort of European history, isn't there, where it's just big armies marching around and, civilians are kept out of the way of it. But this is basically 21st century warfare, isn't it? It's take the towns, it's kill the civilians, it's ruin the country. And the person who's involved in all of this, which is medieval warfare, is sitting atop this sort of chivalric pyramid, where all the people beneath him are all kind of prepared for single combat and fist fights, as it were, in good old sort of macho style. But actually, he's in charge of a sort of war machine. And there's a tension there, I think.
Helen?
Yes, I think the tension is most obvious in Copland, who will hang on to his prisoner until he gets a receipt. There's no way. I mean, he's made his house's fortune by a lucky capture, and he is not going to. He's not going to give up.
Lynn?
Yeah. I think that reveals the fact that there's a certain public dimension to honor and chivalry, that I'm not going to give up my prisoner until I can do it publicly to the king himself, so everybody knows it was me and the king owes me. If I just hand him over to the queen, more or less privately, that doesn't do much for my honor, for my reputation, for my status.
Or my bottom line.
There you go.
Which is very important.
And I'm just thinking now ahead in the sense of, where does this fit within the extended Marvel universe of English history plays? Because of course they both Prince Edward and Edward III will die, and this direct line of kingship is skips a generation down to the very, very young Richard II, who of course we have encountered in Jack Straw and Thomas of Woodstock. We don't meet any of the Prince Edward's brothers, I think, in this play, so we don't even get them connecting. So there's sort of an interesting lack of connecting tissue with what follows, that everyone talks about King Edward and what he does, Poitiers and Crécy, etc. But nobody, there isn't actually a baton being passed from this play to any that follow that we have directly, because of course there may be other plays that do other different overlappiness things. Other things more specifically about this scene, and the Salisbury speech is absolutely, it's a pucker speech, isn't it? It's and it's feeding off that imagery that was suggested by sound and by how battles were described earlier. Rachael?
No, it's kind of that speech is kind of like, in the misfortunes of Arthur, or those types of, like, I don't know, is those speeches, and then King Edward's right after with the his bones, about his bones, and it's so poetic, and it's so yeah. I was just saying that in the chat that the Salisbury speech is like one of those Nuntius speeches, and that style of neoclassical like writing, like with like Jocasta and those like long messenger speeches, seems to really have influenced this scene, but also some other parts of the text.
Yes, there is this sort of Senecan influence of let's describe things that are happening off, so that we don't have to stage. In this case, so that we don't have to stage battles. There doesn't. Again, it may just not be in the script, but we don't seem to really have any indication of any on-stage fighting at all. Some running. There's some running is actually mentioned in stage directions, but and there are a reasonable number of stage directions in the text as well. So that seems to be a deliberate thing. Stephen and then Briony.
Yeah, just following on from that, I suppose it reminded me a bit of the theory that early modern acting is, when people praise early modern actors, they talk about their passions, and that there's a kind of certain number of passions, and if you can really master one of those, then they're the kind of set pieces. And this is sort of a scene of a really big aria and a really sort of small aria after that, because the Salisbury one, I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But it works really nicely together with, if you imagine Edwards as a sort of shorter aria, that what we're getting is just gush, gush, mood, mood, mood. But they're two completely different ones. And they're both in their own way set pieces of a single emotional note.
Briony.
And then to kind of break that straight afterwards, you've got the Herald appearing. I was just going to say, because we've mentioned before about how you wouldn't necessarily plan to have one person playing all of these different heralds, but from that point of view, if you were going that route, it's just really fun that in this last scene the herald finally gets to come and give some good news.
Absolutely, and it's almost as close to a gag as you're going to get in this play, because there's a slight humour to this of all of this, because we know he's not dead, so he's doing all this stuff about revenge and burning, and and the audience is either going, "Hang on, did I miss something?" or they're going, "Oh, you're going to regret this in a minute," and that's I quite like. I'm interested in what the audience reaction actually turns out to be. Eric, then Rachael.
I feel like this play ends a bit abruptly though. Like you're not entirely okay. It's obviously a different sort of unit of movement to go from France to England, but I don't know. It just feels a bit like pulling the brakes on a sharp corner. I don't know if that's just me.
I don't know. We can see what people think and around the room as we go. We'll be going around in it just a moment. I have various thoughts on that, but I will hold them to myself. Rachael, you had a point.
Yeah, this scene, in the first session we had a lot of those scenes where it was comedy and then it got serious, and it's like, should I have laughed in this moment, after I've seen where it leads to, and maybe just this King Edward and Salisbury, in the anger that Edward expresses right before the herald comes in, maybe because so much of the action happens off stage, it makes the audience think that perhaps Edward IV has gotten it off stage from the reactions of these people, and then it pulls out one final time, the rug out from under the audience, and it's like, just kidding, this time it's something bad, and then a laugh. It was all okay.
Stephen.
It was just to Eric's point, we could have quite an extended leave taking if we have a procession. We're kind of set up for that by the sort of kings, princes, whatever. So they could sort of march him around in triumph, as it were, and it would be something that wouldn't has happened before with captured kings.
And this is a scene where we do seem to have the maximum number of bodies on stage. I could be wrong there. I need to look at the various casting things. But we have a significant number of people on stage during this scene. By the end of it, we slowly accrue prisoners and victors. So it is building for the big the closing moment. So yeah, that seems appropriate. Briony.
Yeah, I think because there's all this intensity in at the end here, and well, I mean throughout as well, and so many powerful words, and then at the very end it is kind of a bit like, and they all live happily ever after. Three kings, two princes, and a queen. P.S. It's a sausage fest.
Yes, it absolutely is. There's something very tokenistic about the arrival of Queen Philippa here. Presaged for a long time, but only actually in one scene. Yeah, it's weird because I find that the final scene is sort of both too long and too short at the same time. It's sort of, because we know it's tying up of loose ends. It's very clear early on that that's what this scene is doing. And then it sends on a slightly interesting tangent with Salisbury. Beautiful though Salisbury's speech is, and the effect that happens with the king, it does slightly wrong foot rather than just having the prince enter and saying, "We won, huzzah!" There's this sort of slight diversion, and then it seems to end feels like it suddenly ends very quickly after that. But I don't know if it does. It just maybe feels like it does, if that makes sense. Anything else on Act 5 before I go around the room for final thoughts? So we have, collectively at least, read through the entire text as we have it. Any final thoughts in the room? If you don't have to repeat things if you've already said it, or somebody else has already said your point, you can just wave and I'll move on. But I'll start with Stephen. Any final thoughts?
I suppose just that the play seems to have left an impression, that partly because perhaps the doings of Edward III were part of the, if anything is a curriculum, then this is part of the grammar school curriculum. So there's a kind of an English guy wrote a Latin poem, which is basically sort of a vision of history as famous battles and famous victories from about now to sort of Henry VIII's time. And Edward III is a huge part of that. So it's a very familiar subject matter. And we've got a few kind of contemporary references which imply that Edward III is still being remembered in the 1610s. So whether that's just because Edward III's doings were so great that didn't even need to be that good a play, or whether it's because this play really hit home. And one of those references also references the Countess as a character, very, very briefly in a list of virtuous women, but she's there, which for somebody who basically gets two scenes in a play ain't bad going. And there's a ballad about the king and the countess, which is basically a sort of song version of that bit of the play, and that hits the streets not long after the play does. So it does seem to have been really, really popular, not necessarily in ways that we might agree with, but it does seem to have kind of hit the right note. And it's quite unusual to have that sort of sense about one of these plays, of how it went. So I think that is interesting, but I think the play is not what the accounts of it necessarily tell us, which is, anybody watching this play is going to go, yeah, I wish there was some French around now so I could do that, to rouse you to masculine emulation.
Yes, I don't think it necessarily has that effect today. Though I can imagine it having that effect then very, very easily. And that's one of those problems that we have with some history plays for their intentions. Though often they have changed over time. Alan, any final thoughts?
I must admit, the second half, or the last 3/5 of this, there are some very, very good speeches. But quite honestly, I find it highly unsatisfying as a piece. As I said the other day, I think Act 1 and 2 together would make a damn good short play. I'm not convinced that the effort that would need to be put in to do the remainder of the piece is actually a worthwhile exercise.
Well, I'll go to Eric next on that, because and Rachael to a degree, because we've been doing the this sort of neoclassical stuff, where which oddly chimes nicely with this one, and now that we hit the sort of key elements like overemphasis on birds, that there is a way of into making this a quite effective stage vehicle that I definitely have a hair running now that I didn't when we started reading this. I don't know if that parallel is overplayed. I don't know if, Eric, you agree on that point, or if you have other points of your own. Eric, any final thoughts?
That is actually a good point. I did not think of that. There are a lot of good speeches in this one. But if you compare them to like the 4-page speeches that we've seen in neoclassical plays, it's shorter, but also kind of more interesting in some ways. A lot more happens in those speeches than because usually you get people to narrate what has happened, which I guess fits with this. Yeah, what else was I going to say? I don't know. It's interesting because I really want to see this at pace, because I feel like breaking it up has actually ruined it in some ways. It kind of ruins the climax of the action, and obviously now that we know what happens, it's kind of maybe ruined a bit. But I really want to see what happens later.
Yeah, absolutely. Act 4 definitely feels like you did by stopping and starting so often. There's 7, 8 scenes in it, and they are made up of smaller units of action that you completely lose the flow of what potentially is going on there. Lynn, any final thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things unrelated to each other. I just wanted to echo what Briony said earlier in the session about the verse being very good, I think. The metaphors and the imagery are quite powerful at times. The pentameter it hits that sweet spot between being too ba-dump and so enjammed and syntactically complex that it's hard to deliver in with clarity. So I think the verse is really very skillful. It's my impression of it. So the other point not related to the technical point is there's something very nostalgic about the 3rd, 4th, and 5th acts of this text, formally as well as thematically. That we have these long messenger speeches rather than, we do love telling rather than showing. We don't have any actual on stage combat. There's alarms, but no excursions. We don't have, Charles and Prince Edward doing, one-on-one sword fight where Edward defeats him and captures him. Like, there's no hand-to-hand portrayed on stage that we can tell from the stage directions. It's all reported, which is a classical, neoclassical feature. And there seems to be this longing for the good old days when people were noble, and even though they have to keep being reminded to be noble, they always do the right thing in the end. And, nostalgia is always a longing for an imagined past that never really happened. And we have this "and they lived happily ever after" ending. But of course, the audience would have known that Prince Edward died in England of dysentery, and that his son, who inherited the throne at the age of 10, was unpopular and an unsuccessful king. So it's like the good old days, and it's so sad that they're lost, and it's just, they'll never be that good again. I get that is actually a tone that I'm picking up from it.
You've given me a closing thought. Thank you. I will return to some of what you've just said. Rachael, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I wrote this down, and it kind of does relate to what Lynn said about the nostalgia, is that some of the early scenes just like is kind of War and Peace-ish, or like, something like Rococo, like that. It's not that it's that level of like, in your face, like money or corruption or something like that. but it's like, a piece of, something pleasant and then unpleasant, a chapter of pleasantry and then unpleasant stuff. And kind of like this is exalting of a bygone era. Some great scenes and monologues, and then just the neoclassical influence. Even the ending, that it kind of leaves you wanting more, and seems to like stop short a little bit. I think is because it's trying to do something else. Then I think it has the, what do you call it? Like a more neutral conclusion to do that thing that drama is supposed to do, of making you think and go inward. And then just great potential with that one scene with the crows. Yeah, and I don't know what to say about this last part, but just that Edward IV takes up so much space in this last third of the play, I think is very interesting in Edward III.
Yeah, sadly he doesn't make it to be Edward IV. He dies before it happens. Just for anyone confused, Edward IV is a very different king, except he's quite similar to Edward III in a sense, in the sense of Acts 1 and 2. Briony, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just that I really like. Well, I mean, my favourite bit of it is definitely Acts 1 and 2 because I love the Countess, but with all this war stuff, I really like how kind of immersive and involved it is, and atmospheric with this potential soundscape and the way they've tackled it. Because sometimes for me, it's not a huge interest of mine within plays, war, and it can just be, this duke of there and that duke of coming in and telling us about this battle, and I just lose track and lose interest a bit. But whereas this, like I say, it seems to grab you that much more, with how it's done, like the way a decent horror film pulls you right in.
Elizabeth, any final thoughts?
Yes, Rob, I'll just be quite brief. I was thinking about the contrast between what Briony was just talking about, the Countess in Act 1 and Act 2. And now in Acts 4 and 5, we see a story of kings. And it reminded me very much of like these narratives about kingship and kingdom. And we had King Edward, King David, and King John. And I liked the contrast between the three. I thought that was really telling and really impacting. And I did very much enjoy this play. I thought it was a very refreshing take on this historical story. That's all.
Lovely. Dan, you've only been here for this session. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yes, I am very sad to have only been here for the final session, because this is a play that I've always wanted to read, because I'm always interested in the history plays, and specifically it fills in a gap for me of my knowledge of not only this play but of this time period in English monarchy. So it's difficult for me to talk about it, because from what I understand about the play, I guess it sounds a lot like a lot of the action that I might have been interested in happened in the first 3 acts. This play didn't go the way that I thought it would. It definitely had those neoclassical influences in it. I expected it to be more of, considering it's Edward III and the Black Prince, I guess a lot more action-packed. And it wasn't that. This is not to say it couldn't have been staged with those things, but as Robert pointed out with the stage directions, this was a highly detailed play in that respect, and this does not look at all like the manuscript does not look at all like the one that would have been used as the playbook, but more, I would say, probably once again authorial type stage directions. So I can't really speak about the play as a whole, but that was just my impression. The one thing I can point out that I'm happy to have read or noticed is this is the 3rd week in a row running, and I don't think it's by I think it's probably by accident that we're following the same printer, Thomas Scarlett, who had also printed Mother Bombay and Midas. And this does not look at all like his work, meaning to me that it was probably one of his, either different compositor or just somebody who worked under him who didn't follow, I guess, the house style of it. This was reprinted 3 years later by Simon Stafford, who once again has confirmed to me, whose work I've been following, that he likes to make a lot of corrections to this text. And as people were noting, I think in the chat, I think it had to do a lot with the scanning of this text, but also this is a pretty messy text and it's not really well laid out, despite it being fairly detailed in its directions. And Stafford in the second quarter, which this seems to follow our text, has attempted to correct a lot of these items. So for those who might be interested in that, probably no one, but I am.
Some of the errors are authentic, but some of them are not.
Yeah.
So, Valentina, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I lost the first part, but this seems to me like it's a perfect Zoom play because it's so evocative, but there's not that much interaction. Which, I mean, I'd be really interested to see, like, I think it would make a great second look. And I really enjoyed the parts that I've seen.
Lovely. Helen, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, play of two halves. I'm very reluctant to say much about this play because I don't know enough. I really need to know when its first performance is likely to have been. I feel that it is speaking to something in history, in the history of its time. France was always the enemy. I mean, up to the 19th century, even after, I mean, there is definitely a feeling, I think, even at the moment, that if we have a great enemy in the world, it's definitely France. Yeah, I'm not being coherent here because I really, really haven't got my head around this play yet. Sorry.
That's all right. But, you know, impressions without data is a random stab to the dark is absolutely fine.
I love it. I really, really love it.
Aliki, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this as well. I guess really only I like the whole thing about the crows, the ravens, whatever they are, and let's go full Hitchcock. Let's have pigeons in London and sparrows in the lanes and seagulls on the crossing to Calais or in Calais.
Lovely. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to bounce off? We have a minute, 1 minute. Dan.
Just wanted to add, just for the record, that this was pretty well quoted in Belvedere, the commonplace book that was printed, which I wonder how much that feeds or is related to what Helen is saying is, I guess, the idea that I would really want to know what this play meant for the public at that time.
Yeah.
Because this, if he's extracting this in Belvedere, the items that Belvedere quotes, it seems to have, it quoted a lot of seemingly popular items at the time. Edward III, in that respect, seems to have been something that would have hit home with the audience, or at least with this fellow.
Well, my final thought, just to throw this in, following on from Lynn, talking about striving for nobility and chivalry, it reminds me of one of the fundamental problems with the ideals of Star Trek and its actual application. Because Gene Roddenberry, especially towards the end of his life, was determined that everyone was going to, in the future, was perfect. Everyone was nice and noble and wonderful. And the writers went, we've got nothing to write. Because that's really boring. And the general tweak is, well, you can't be noble, you must be striving to be noble, and you have to be reminded to be noble, and maybe that's one of the prime motivators for what some of this play is trying to do, and some of it goes perhaps too far into striving to find fault with the king and then move away, and others are a more balanced depiction of it. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful readers for all their wonderful time. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.
Another sound.